She defied every order they gave her, stole a billion-dollar fighter jet, and single-handedly changed the course of a war. But before that day, Major Sophia Reynolds was just another pilot, grounded by the rules she couldn't break. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning briefing at Hawthorne Air Force Base had the usual energy of controlled chaos. Officers shuffled through mission packets, while technicians tested equipment in the background. The air smelled of coffee and jet fuel, a scent that Sophia had come to associate with both possibility and frustration. Major Sophia Reynolds sat in the back corner of the briefing room, her chair positioned slightly away from the main cluster of personnel. She held her assignment packet loosely in one hand, already knowing what it contained before opening it. Support role. Training simulations. Advisory capacity only. The familiar weight of being sidelined settled over her shoulders like an old jacket. Colonel James Harrison stood at the front of the room, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never questioned his right to be heard. Today's operation focuses on the eastern approach to the Kazzar Valley. We've got reliable intelligence about enemy air defenses being installed along the corridor. Sophia's eyes moved to the tactical map projected on the wall. She had studied this area extensively during her downtime, memorizing topographical features and potential blind spots that others might miss. The valley offered a perfect approach for their F-22s, but only if they used the terrain masking she'd mapped out in her spare time. Reynolds. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through her thoughts. You'll be stationed at the simulator center as backup support. Your job is simple. Prepare training scenarios based on whatever intel comes back from the actual mission. A few snickers rippled through the room. Captain Mark Davis, seated 2 rows ahead, turned slightly and muttered something to his neighbor about desk jockeys playing pilot. The comment wasn't meant for her ears, but sound carried in the metal-walled briefing room. Sophia kept her expression neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly on the assignment packet. She had graduated top of her class at the Air Force Academy, spent thousands of hours in actual flight time, and had more simulator experience in the F-22 Raptor than anyone else on the base. Her evaluations consistently rated her technical skills as exceptional, but somehow she always found herself assigned to support roles, watching from the sidelines, while others flew the actual missions. Any questions? Colonel Harrison scanned the room with practiced efficiency. Sophia raised her hand slightly. Sir, the approach vector shown on the tactical map exposes our aircraft to the valley's eastern ridge. I've studied the terrain extensively, and there's a better approach using the western canyon as cover. The flight plan is adequate as written, Reynolds. Harrison interrupted, his tone suggesting the topic was closed. Your role is to observe the mission outcomes, not to redesign operational parameters. The dismissal stung more than it should have. Around the room, a few people exchanged glances. Some looked uncomfortable with the abrupt shutdown, while others seemed to view it as standard procedure. Sophia lowered her hand and nodded once, filing away the interaction for later consideration. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez, seated near the equipment table, caught Sophia's eye and gave a subtle nod of acknowledgement. Kelly had been one of the few people who consistently treated Sophia's input with respect, often seeking her opinion on technical matters away from the formal briefing environment. As the meeting concluded and personnel began filing out, Sophia gathered her materials methodically. She had learned to move deliberately in these situations, avoiding the rushed energy that might draw unwanted attention. Her routine was already planned for the day. Simulator time, followed by tactical analysis, followed by more simulator time. The cycle of preparation for missions she would never be allowed to fly. Outside the briefing room, the base hummed with pre-mission activity. Mechanics performed last-minute checks on the F-22s. Pilots went through their pre-flight routines, and intelligence officers scurried about with updated reports. Sophia walked toward the simulator building, her boots steady on the tarmac. The simulation center was state-of-the-art, a cavernous space filled with exact replicas of F-22 cockpits linked to powerful computers that could recreate virtually any combat scenario. Chief Technician Ray Morgan looked up as she approached. "Back again, Reynolds?" Thought you might get assigned to the Kazzar mission. Apparently I'm more valuable in here than out there, Sophia replied, keeping her tone neutral. Ray's expression grew slightly more serious. Word of advice. That valley they're heading into is trickier than the briefing made it sound. The wind patterns create some nasty turbulence around those ridge lines. Sophia nodded, appreciating the practical information. Any recommendations for alternative approaches if the primary route becomes compromised? There's a secondary approach through the Western Canyon. Not as direct, but it offers better terrain masking against those new anti-aircraft batteries they're worried about. As Ray helped her set up the day's simulation parameters, Sophia felt the familiar mix of anticipation and frustration that accompanied these assignments. She was capable of so much more than running simulations, but the military hierarchy had its own logic, and questioning it openly had never improved her situation. The simulator powered up with a low hum, its systems coming online as Sophia settled into the cockpit. She ran her hands over the controls with practiced familiarity. In here, at least, she could fly any mission she wanted. The computer didn't care about gender or outdated policies about women in combat roles. I've loaded the Kazzar Valley terrain model. Ray called from his workstation. Want me to add the anti-aircraft emplacements according to this morning's intel? Please do, Sophia replied. And Ray, add in those weather conditions you mentioned, the turbulence along the ridgelines. If I'm supposed to prepare training scenarios based on the mission results, I should have the most accurate model possible. She spent the next hour running simulated approaches to the valley, testing various entry points and tactics. Each time, the eastern approach specified in the official briefing resulted in the simulated F-22 taking significant defensive radar lock-ons. But when she tried the Western Canyon route, the aircraft remained virtually undetected until it was too late for the enemy defenses to respond effectively. You're right about the Western approach, Ray said, reviewing her simulation data. It's clearly superior. Did you bring this up at the briefing? I tried, Sophia said simply, continuing her work. By midday, Sophia had compiled a comprehensive analysis of both approaches, complete with survival probability statistics and weapons deployment scenarios. The data was irrefutable. The Western approach offered a 76% higher survival rate and 83% greater mission success probability. She was halfway through composing an email to forward these findings to Colonel Harrison when the first alerts began to sound across the base. Red warning lights flashed in the simulation center as the base-wide communications system crackled to life. All personnel, we have a situation developing in the Kazzar Valley operation. Stand by for updates. Ray's computer console lit up with incoming data streams. Something's gone wrong, he muttered, fingers flying across his keyboard. The mission team has encountered unexpected resistance. They're taking heavy fire from positions that weren't in the intel briefing. Sophia leaned over his shoulder, scanning the incoming tactical data. The F-22 squadron had flown directly into an ambush. The eastern ridge of the valley was bristling with advanced surface-to-air missile systems that hadn't been there during their last reconnaissance pass. They're boxed in, she said, quickly assessing the tactical display. If they try to climb out, they'll be exposed to the SAM batteries. If they continue forward, they'll face the new emplacements at the valley exit. The radio chatter playing through the simulation center speakers grew increasingly urgent. Raptor lead to command, we are taking fire from multiple directions. SAM launches detected from positions Echo 3 and Echo 7. Requesting immediate support and alternate exit vector. Command to Raptor lead, maintain current course. Support is being analyzed. Sophia returned to her simulator, quickly programming in the real-time battlefield data. Within minutes, she had mapped the actual threat environment and was running potential escape scenarios. The results were grim. The squadron's current trajectory had them flying directly into the heart of the enemy's integrated air defense system. But there was a way out, a narrow corridor through the Western Canyon that would allow the F-22s to use terrain masking to slip past the SAM batteries. It would require precise flying through a tight space with dangerously unpredictable wind conditions, but it was their best chance of survival. She grabbed her tablet and rushed to the communication station. I need to speak to Mission Command immediately. I have critical information about an escape route for the Raptor Squadron. The communications officer looked uncomfortable. Major Reynolds, you're not authorized to interface with the active Mission Command. Your role is support and simulation only. People are going to die if I don't get this information to them, Sophia insisted, showing him the tactical display on her tablet. "This route here, through the Western Canyon, it's their only viable escape option. I can forward your recommendation through proper channels," the officer replied, "but I can't patch you directly into Mission Command." Sophia watched in frustration as her tactical analysis disappeared into the bureaucratic system, knowing that each minute of delay decreased the squadron's chances of survival. On the main screen, the situation continued to deteriorate as more enemy air defense systems came online, gradually closing the narrow escape window she had identified. "Raptor 3 is hit! Raptor 3 is hit!" The voice over the communications system was tense but controlled. "Engine failure, attempting to maintain altitude. Raptor lead to command, we need an exit strategy now. The primary route is completely compromised." Sophia couldn't stand it any longer. She keyed an emergency override code into her console, a code she wasn't supposed to know but had memorized during a late-night study session of the base's communication protocols. "Raptor lead, this is Major Reynolds at Hawthorne Simulation Center. Your best escape vector is through the Western Canyon at coordinates 34, 5 north, 67, 8 east. The canyon provides terrain masking against the SAM batteries on the eastern ridge." There was a moment of shocked silence before Raptor lead responded. "Command, please confirm authorization for this guidance." Before Command could respond, Sophia continued, her voice calm and authoritative despite knowing she was exceeding her authority by light years. "Raptor lead, the Western Canyon has variable wind conditions that will create turbulence. But if you maintain an altitude of 500 feet and follow the river line, you'll remain below enemy radar coverage. I've run the simulation 17 times. It's your squadron's best chance of survival." The communications officer was frantically trying to shut down her connection, but Sophia had locked him out of the system temporarily. On the tactical display, she could see the F-22 squadron hesitating at the valley's midpoint, caught between advancing and retreating, both options potentially fatal. "Major Reynolds, this is Colonel Harrison. You are ordered to terminate this unauthorized communication immediately." Sophia ignored the command, keeping her focus on the pilots who were in immediate danger. "Raptor lead, you have a 90-second window before the SAM batteries at the eastern ridge reposition to cover the Western Canyon. You need to make your decision now." There was another moment of silence, and then, "Raptor Squadron, this is Raptor lead. We're taking the Western Canyon route. Form up on my wing and follow my exact course." On the tactical display, Sophia watched as the squadron of F-22s banked sharply and dove toward the western edge of the valley, disappearing into the narrow canyon she had identified. The SAM radar signatures swept across the valley but couldn't penetrate the terrain masking provided by the canyon walls. "Stay low," Sophia advised, knowing she was going to face severe consequences for her actions but unable to stop now that she had committed. "There's a series of switchbacks about 2 miles ahead. The canyon widens slightly there, which might expose you to radar briefly. If you hug the western wall, you should maintain coverage." She continued to guide the squadron through the treacherous canyon system, providing real-time adjustments based on her intimate knowledge of the terrain and the F-22's capabilities. The simulation hours she had logged in this exact scenario were paying off, allowing her to anticipate challenges before the pilots encountered them. 20 agonizing minutes later, the tactical display showed the F-22 squadron emerging from the canyon system, well outside the enemy's air defense network. All aircraft were accounted for, including Raptor 3, which had managed to limp along despite its damaged engine. "Raptor lead to base. Squadron is clear of the engagement zone." Returning to home plate. The relief in the pilot's voice was palpable, but Sophia had no time to savor it. The door to the simulation center burst open, and military police entered with Colonel Harrison right behind them. "Major Sophia Reynolds, you are relieved of duty effective immediately," Harrison announced, his face flushed with anger. "You have directly violated orders and interfered with an active combat mission. Consider yourself confined to quarters pending investigation." As the MPs escorted her from the simulation center, Sophia caught a glimpse of Ray's face. He gave her a subtle nod of respect, even as Colonel Harrison began ordering a complete lockdown of the communication system she had compromised. Back in her quarters, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, contemplating the likely end of her military career. She had known the risks when she overrode the communication systems. But knowing that the alternative was watching good pilots die because of a flawed mission plan had made the choice inevitable. A soft knock on her door broke her reverie. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez slipped inside before the MP stationed outside could object. "You saved their lives," Kelly said without preamble. "Raptor Lead is telling everyone how your guidance got them through that canyon when command had no solution to offer." "I broke about 15 regulations," Sophia replied. "Harrison will make sure I'm court-martialed for this." "Maybe," Kelly acknowledged, "but the flight recorder data shows that the squadron would have been lost if they'd continued on the original course. Even Harrison can't ignore that fact." As Kelly left, Sophia turned to the window, watching as the returning F-22s landed on the distant runway. Whatever happened next, she had proven that her knowledge and skills were equal to the challenge when lives were on the line. The system might punish her for exceeding her authority, but she would face those consequences knowing she had made the right choice. The formal notification of her disciplinary hearing arrived the next morning. The charges were serious: unauthorized access to secure systems, interfering with an active combat mission, and willful disobedience of direct orders. The potential consequences included dishonorable discharge and possibly even criminal charges. Sophia read the document twice, noting the severe tone and the list of witnesses who would testify about her actions. Most were administrative personnel who would simply confirm that she had violated protocols, but at the bottom of the list was a name that gave her pause: Captain Michael Torres, Raptor Lead. The pilot whose squadron she had saved would be testifying against her. The irony was bitter, but not unexpected. Military discipline often trumped practical outcomes, especially when someone had so blatantly stepped outside the chain of command. As she prepared for the hearing, Sophia received an unexpected visitor. Chief Technician Ray Morgan appeared at her quarters with a data drive and a determined expression. "Reynolds, I've been analyzing the communication logs from yesterday's operation. Your intervention wasn't just helpful, it was essential. The official communication channels had completely failed to provide viable alternatives to the squadron." Sophia invited him in, curious about his findings. Ray had always been fair in his dealings with her, and his technical expertise was widely respected on the base. "The enemy had clearly studied our standard operational procedures," Ray explained, connecting the data drive to Sophia's laptop. "They positioned their air defenses specifically to counter our typical approach vectors. Your Western Canyon route was the only path that they hadn't covered, probably because it doesn't appear in any of our standard flight manuals." "That doesn't change the fact that I access systems I wasn't authorized to use," Sophia pointed out. "Maybe not, but it does raise questions about whether our procedures are adequate for complex combat situations. Your actions highlighted systemic weaknesses that need to be addressed." Ray spread out several documents on Sophia's desk. "I've prepared a technical analysis of the communication failures and the tactical situation. It doesn't excuse your violation of procedures, but it does provide context for why your actions were necessary." Sophia studied the documents, noting the detailed analysis of enemy positions, communication timestamps, and the decision matrices that had led to the squadron's predicament. Ray's report painted a picture of a command structure that had failed under pressure, leaving combat pilots without the guidance they needed to survive. "Will this be part of the official record?" she asked. "If you want it to be, I can submit it as supporting documentation for the hearing. It won't change the charges, but it might influence the outcome." Sophia made her decision. "Submit it. If I'm going to face consequences for my actions, I want the complete picture to be available." As Ray prepared to leave, he turned back with one final comment. "Reynolds, I've been in the Air Force for 20 years. I've seen a lot of people follow orders without thinking, and I've seen a few people who were willing to make hard decisions when the situation demanded it. You're one of the latter, and that's not something to be ashamed of." The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for 0800 hours the next day. Sophia spent the remaining time preparing her statement and reviewing the charges one final time. Whatever happened, she would face the consequences with the same integrity she had brought to her actions in the simulation center. The hearing room was sterile and formal, with fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across the gray metal furniture. Sophia sat at the defendant's table, her dress uniform crisp and her bearings straight, while General Westfield reviewed the case file with methodical precision. Colonel Harrison sat at the prosecutor's table, his expression unreadable as he organized his documents. This hearing will address charges of unauthorized system access, interference with an active combat mission, and willful disobedience of orders during Operation Kazzar Valley. General Westfield began, his voice carrying the weight of formal military justice. Major Reynolds, you understand the charges against you? Yes, sir. I understand the charges, and I do not dispute the basic facts. General Westfield raised an eyebrow slightly. You're admitting to the charges? I'm admitting that I accessed communication systems without authorization and provided tactical guidance to Raptor Squadron when they were in imminent danger. I did so because I believed the tactical situation required immediate action to prevent casualties among our pilots. Colonel Harrison leaned forward. Major Reynolds, you were specifically briefed that your role was limited to simulation and support. You had no authority to access combat communication channels or provide tactical guidance. That's correct, sir. My assigned role was support only. Yet, you deliberately chose to exceed that authority and interfere with a tactical situation that was being handled by qualified personnel through proper channels. Sophia felt the familiar weight of institutional authority pressing against her, but this time she was prepared to push back. Sir, the proper channels had failed. The squadron was flying directly into an ambush with no viable escape route provided by command. I had run simulations that demonstrated a safe exit through the Western Canyon, but my attempts to share that information through official channels were delayed by procedural requirements. That doesn't give you the right to bypass established command structures, Harrison replied sharply. Military operations require coordination and authorization. Individual initiative that bypasses command authority creates chaos and endangers lives. General Westfield held up a hand to pause the exchange. Major Reynolds, walk us through your decision-making process. What specifically led you to believe that unauthorized action was necessary? Sophia had prepared for this question, but she knew her answer would either justify her actions or condemn them completely. Sir, I monitored the tactical situation as it developed. Raptor Squadron was taking enemy fire and had lost their primary exit route. Their transmitted requests for alternative guidance were met with delays from command. I had clear simulation data showing a viable escape route through the Western Canyon, and I had the technical capability to provide accurate tactical guidance. But you had no authority to provide that guidance. No, sir. I made the decision to exceed my authority because I believed that following proper procedures would result in the loss of Raptor Squadron and their pilots. Colonel Harrison stood up, his voice taking on the formal tone of prosecution. General Westfield, Major Reynolds has admitted to deliberately violating her orders and exceeding her assigned authority. Her actions, regardless of their outcome, represent a fundamental breach of military discipline and chain of command. The outcome is relevant. A new voice interrupted from the back of the room. Captain Michael Torres, still in his flight suit, entered with several other pilots from Raptor Squadron. General Westfield frowned. Captain Torres, this is a disciplinary hearing, not a debriefing. Sir, with respect, my squadron's survival is directly relevant to Major Reynolds' actions. The escape route she provided saved 6 pilots and 6 F-22s worth over $1 billion. Our flight recorder data confirms that continuing on our original vector would have resulted in catastrophic losses. Quote, Colonel Harrison objected. Technical success doesn't excuse violations of military authority. Major Reynolds should have followed proper channels regardless of the circumstances. Even if following proper channels would have resulted in the loss of my squadron? Torres asked quietly. The room fell silent. General Westfield leaned back in his chair, studying Sophia with an expression that revealed nothing about his thoughts. Colonel Harrison shuffled through his papers, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Major Reynolds, General Westfield said finally, you're asking this hearing to consider whether tactical success justifies violating orders. That's a dangerous precedent. Sir, I'm asking this hearing to consider whether rigid adherence to procedures is more important than preserving lives when those procedures have failed to address an urgent tactical situation. The procedures exist for good reasons, General Westfield continued. They ensure coordination, prevent friendly fire incidents, and maintain command authority. Your actions could have resulted in catastrophic consequences. Sophia had expected this argument, Sir, the procedures had already failed. The communication breakdown meant that normal coordination was impossible. Raptor Squadron was surrounded and taking fire. Someone had to provide tactical guidance, and I was the only person with the simulation data showing a viable escape route. Ray Morgan stepped forward. General Westfield, my technical analysis shows that Major Reynolds' guidance was exceptional. She maintained contact with multiple elements simultaneously, provided accurate navigation information, and prevented the loss of 6 pilots and aircraft. Her actions demonstrated exactly the kind of technical competence and tactical judgment that we train our personnel to develop. Colonel Harrison stood up again. Technical competence doesn't excuse insubordination. Military discipline requires following orders, even when individual judgment suggests different actions. And if those orders result in unnecessary casualties, Sophia asked. That's not your decision to make, Harrison snapped. Command authority exists for a reason. Sophia looked directly at General Westfield. Sir, Raptor Squadron would have been lost if I had followed my orders. I chose to act because I believed that my technical skills and tactical knowledge could save lives. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ventilation system. General Westfield studied the documents in front of him, occasionally glancing at Sophia with an expression that suggested he was wrestling with competing principles. This hearing will recess for 1 hour while I review the evidence and testimony, he announced finally. We will reconvene to hear my decision. As the room emptied, Sophia remained seated, processing the weight of what had just occurred. She had defended her actions honestly, but she had also acknowledged her violation of military authority. The decision was now in General Westfield's hands, and whatever he decided would determine the course of her military career. The hour of waiting would be the longest of her life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Sophia sat in the empty hearing room reviewing the events that had led to this moment. She had joined the Air Force to serve something larger than herself, to use her technical skills in missions that mattered. Now that service was being measured against the rigid requirements of military discipline. Captain Torres found her there, staring at the formal documents that would determine her fate. Reynolds, I want you to know that my entire squadron has submitted statements about your tactical guidance. We're all saying the same thing. Without you, we wouldn't have made it back. Sophia looked up from her contemplation. That's gratifying, but it doesn't change what I did. I exceeded my authority deliberately. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't the authorized thing to do. Military history is full of people who had to make that choice. And some of them were court-martialed for it. Some of them were, Torres acknowledged. Others were recognized for their courage and initiative. The difference often depends on the people making the decision. When the hearing reconvened, General Westfield's expression was unreadable. He took his seat with deliberate formality, arranged his papers with precise movements, and looked directly at Sophia before speaking. Major Reynolds, this hearing has presented me with a difficult decision. You have admitted to exceeding your assigned authority and conducting unauthorized tactical communication. These actions constitute clear violations of military regulations and chain of command. Sophia felt her chest tighten. The formal language suggested that her Air Force career was about to end. However, General Westfield continued, the evidence also shows that your actions were taken in response to the failure of authorized procedures and the imminent threat to Raptor Squadron. Your technical competence and tactical judgment prevented casualties and saved valuable aircraft. The room was completely silent. Colonel Harrison leaned forward slightly, his expression suggesting surprise at the direction of the general's comments. Military discipline requires following orders, but it also requires intelligent initiative when circumstances exceed the scope of standard procedures. The question before this hearing is whether your actions represent insubordination or battlefield leadership. Sophia held her breath, waiting for the verdict that would define her future. After reviewing all the evidence, including the technical analysis provided by Chief Morgan and the statements from Raptor Squadron, I find that your actions, while technically unauthorized, were necessary and appropriate given the tactical situation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but General Westfield wasn't finished. However, the irregular nature of your actions cannot be ignored. You will receive a formal reprimand for exceeding your assigned authority, but you will also receive a commendation for exceptional performance under combat conditions. Colonel Harrison stood up. Sir, a reprimand and commendation seem contradictory. Colonel Harrison, military service often involves contradictions. Major Reynolds violated procedures, but she also demonstrated exactly the kind of technical competence and tactical judgment that we need in our personnel. The reprimand acknowledges the violation while the commendation recognizes the results. General Westfield turned back to Sophia. Major Reynolds, you will also be transferred to a new assignment where your technical skills can be properly utilized. You've demonstrated that you're capable of much more than running simulations. Sophia stood up, her voice steady despite the emotional impact of the decision. Thank you, sir. I accept both the reprimand and the commendation. One more thing, General Westfield added. The communication failures that occurred during this operation have highlighted serious gaps in our operational procedures. You will be assigned to a team that's reviewing these procedures and developing new protocols for complex combat situations. As the hearing concluded, Sophia felt a complex mix of emotions. She had been vindicated but also chastened. Her actions had been recognized as necessary but also acknowledged as irregular. The military system had found a way to honor her contribution while maintaining its institutional authority. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez approached her as they left the hearing room. How do you feel about the outcome? Sophia considered the question carefully. I feel like I did the right thing, and that the system found a way to recognize that without abandoning its principles. You realize this changes everything for you, right? You're not going to be running simulations anymore. They're going to want to use your skills where they can make a real difference. The weight of that realization was both exciting and daunting. Sophia had proven herself capable of tactical coordination under pressure, but she had also learned that such capabilities came with significant responsibilities and risks. Colonel Harrison passed them in the hallway, his expression neutral but not hostile. Major Reynolds, he said quietly. I disagreed with the general's decision, but I respect it. If you're going to be providing tactical guidance in the future, make sure you're prepared for the responsibility. Sophia nodded respectfully. I understand, sir. I'll do my best to earn the trust that's been placed in me. As she walked back to her quarters, Sophia reflected on the events that had brought her to this point. She had started as a simulator pilot, relegated to support roles while others flew the actual missions. Now she was being recognized as someone capable of providing tactical leadership when circumstances demanded it. The path forward would be challenging, but she felt ready for whatever came next. 6 months after the hearing, Sophia stood in a tactical operations center that bore little resemblance to the simulation room where she had spent so much of her career. Banks of sophisticated equipment hummed quietly around her, and multiple screens displayed real-time tactical information from operations across the theater. She wore the insignia of a newly promoted lieutenant colonel, a recognition of both her technical expertise and her proven ability to perform under pressure. The assignment to the tactical development team had transformed her military career in ways she had never imagined. Instead of being relegated to simulation duties, she was now helping to design the combat protocols and procedures that would guide future operations. Her experience with Raptor Squadron had become a case study in adaptive leadership and emergency tactical coordination. Ray Morgan approached her workstation with a satisfied expression. Colonel Reynolds, the new tactical protocols you designed just completed their field testing. The results exceeded all expectations. Sophia looked up from the technical specifications she had been reviewing. How did the integrated communications system perform? Flawlessly. The combat teams reported that they had clear coordination throughout the exercise, even when primary networks experienced simulated failures. Your multi-channel approach gives commanders the redundancy they need for complex operations. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. The unauthorized tactical work that had nearly ended her career was now being institutionalized as standard procedure. The emergency protocols she had improvised during the Kazzar Valley incident were being incorporated into official combat doctrine. There's something else, Ray continued. General Martinez wants to see you this afternoon. She's been following your work on the tactical protocols. Sophia felt a flutter of anticipation. General Martinez commanded the entire theater of operations, and her attention could mean either opportunity or scrutiny. Did she say what this is about? She's considering you for assignment to a new joint task force that's being formed. Special operations coordination working directly with air assets and ground elements. It's exactly the kind of role your skills are suited for. As Ray left, Sophia returned to her work with renewed focus. The protocols she was developing would help ensure that future operations didn't experience the communication breakdowns that had nearly led to disaster during the Kazzar Valley mission. Her technical innovations were being incorporated into training programs and operational procedures across multiple branches of the military. Later that afternoon, she found herself in General Martinez's office, a space that radiated authority and competence. The general was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She gestured for Sophia to take a seat across from her desk. "Lieutenant Colonel Reynolds, I've been reviewing your work on the tactical coordination protocols. Impressive technical innovation, especially considering your unconventional introduction to the field." "Thank you, ma'am. I'm grateful for the opportunity to contribute to operational improvements. Your actions during the Kazzar Valley incident have become something of a legend among the flight crews. They tell stories about the voice that guided them through impossible conditions with nothing but simulation data and tactical instinct." Sophia felt a flush of pride mixed with humility. "I was just doing what the situation required, ma'am. That's exactly why I'm considering you for this new assignment. Special operations require people who can think independently and adapt to unexpected circumstances. Your ability to coordinate complex tactical situations has been proven under the most demanding conditions." General Martinez pulled out a folder marked with security classifications. "This task force will be responsible for developing new tactical approaches for our F-22 squadrons operating in contested airspace. You'll be working with some of the most advanced aircraft and weapons systems in our inventory, and your input will help shape how we conduct future operations." The scope of the opportunity was breathtaking. Sophia had gone from being sidelined as a simulator pilot to being asked to help design the future of air combat tactics. Her voice, once dismissed and unauthorized, was now being sought out by the highest levels of military leadership. "Ma'am, I'm honored by your confidence in me. I accept the assignment." "Excellent. You'll be reporting to Strategic Air Command next month. Your first project will be developing tactical protocols for penetrating next-generation air defense systems. It's challenging work, but I believe you're ready for it." As Sophia left the general's office, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The simulator pilot who had been relegated to support roles was now being entrusted with responsibilities that would affect operations across the entire Air Force. That evening, she called Lieutenant Kelly Martinez to share the news. "Kelly, you were right about everything changing. I'm being assigned to Strategic Air Command for Special Operations Development. I knew it would happen eventually. Your skills were too valuable to waste on simulation duties. How do you feel about it?" Sophia considered the question while looking out at the airfield where her military career had been transformed. "I feel like I finally found where I belong. All those years of being overlooked and underutilized led me to this moment. I'm ready to make the most of it." 2 months later, news reached her that Raptor Squadron, the unit she had helped save during the Kazzar Valley incident, had completed another successful mission using the new tactical protocols she had developed. The communication procedures that had emerged from her unauthorized actions were now standard practice, credited with saving lives and improving mission effectiveness across multiple theaters of operation. Sophia had proven that leadership isn't about rank or authorization. It's about having the courage to act when action is needed, the skills to succeed under pressure, and the integrity to accept responsibility for the consequences. Her voice had guided pilots through danger, but more importantly, it had guided the Air Force toward better ways of conducting complex operations. Standing in her new office at Strategic Air Command, surrounded by the sophisticated equipment that would help her coordinate future missions, Sophia remembered the simulation center, where her career had been transformed. She had been told to observe and stay out of the way, but when the moment demanded it, she had found her voice and used it to save lives. Now, that voice was helping to shape the future of military operations, ensuring that other pilots would have the tactical support and guidance they needed to succeed in the most challenging environments. The simulator pilot had become the tactical coordinator. The unauthorized voice had become the standard protocol, and the quiet professional had become a leader whose influence would be felt for years to come. The restrictions had been lifted long ago, but the clarity Sophia had found in that moment of decision continued to guide her path forward. She had learned that sometimes the most important orders are the ones you give yourself, and the most valuable authority is the trust you earn through competence, courage, and unwavering commitment to the mission and the people who depend on you. Her story had become part of Air Force folklore, but more importantly, it had become part of Air Force doctrine. The voice that had once been dismissed as unauthorized was now teaching others how to coordinate the impossible, one clear transmission at a time. Sometimes the most profound leadership comes not from those who hold rank, but from those who hold resolve. Sophia proved that courage isn't about having permission to act. It's about having the strength to do what's right when everything else has failed. Her quiet determination under pressure reminds us that heroes aren't always the ones in the cockpit. Sometimes they're the steady voices who speak up exactly when it matters most. The cool morning air rushed past Lieutenant Colonel Sophia Reynolds as she jogged along the perimeter of Washington Air Force Base, her new home for the past 18 months. The rising sun painted the distant hangars in gold, silhouetting the sleek forms of F-22 Raptors being prepared for the day's operations. A far cry from the simulation rooms where she had spent so much of her early career. Her transfer to Strategic Air Command had accelerated her career in ways she could never have imagined. The tactical coordination protocols she had developed had been implemented across 3 theaters of operation, credited with improving mission success rates by 37% and reducing aircraft losses by nearly half. Her unconventional path to leadership had become something of a legend among younger officers who sought her mentorship and guidance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As she rounded the final turn toward her quarters, Sophia spotted a vehicle with diplomatic flags parked outside the command building. Something important was happening, something that hadn't been on the daily briefing schedule. After a quick shower and change into her uniform, she headed to her office in the Tactical Development Center. The normally bustling corridors seemed unusually quiet, with small groups of officers huddled in tense conversation. Colonel Reynolds. Her aide, Lieutenant Wilson, called, hurrying to catch up with her. General Martinez has called an emergency briefing in 30 minutes. All tactical development leads are required to attend. What's the situation, Lieutenant? They're keeping it close to the vest, ma'am, but rumor is it involves Khorasan. Something about their new air defense network going active ahead of schedule. Sophia felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. The Khorasan situation had been simmering for months. A hostile regime with advanced weapons technology provided by rival superpowers. Their newly acquired S-600 air defense system was supposedly impenetrable, creating a no-fly zone that threatened regional stability and American interests in the area. "Get me everything we have on the S-600 deployment patterns," she instructed, "and find Captain Torres. I want his perspective on the Raptor's electronic countermeasure capabilities against the new Russian systems." "Yes, ma'am." Sophia entered her office to find Ray Morgan already waiting, his normally calm demeanor replaced by barely contained urgency. "Ray, what's happening?" "It's bad, Sophia. Khorasan activated their entire air defense network last night without warning. They've declared a no-fly zone over the Kazzar oil fields, including areas where we have personnel stationed. 3 commercial flights have already been forced to divert, and they're threatening to shoot down any aircraft that enters their airspace." "That's an act of war." "Exactly. And it gets worse. Diplomatic channels have gone silent. Our embassy staff in the capital are essentially hostages, and we have a special forces team embedded with Allied troops near the oil fields who are now cut off from extraction." Sophia processed this information with the cool analytical precision that had become her trademark. The S-600 creates a bubble of denial that conventional aircraft can't penetrate without prohibitive risk. Even stealth aircraft would be detected if they get close enough. That's the consensus. The Joint Chiefs are scrambling for options, but a ground extraction would take too long, and a conventional air assault would lead to unacceptable losses. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sophia pulled up the tactical display on her computer, studying the coverage patterns of the S-600 system. Unlike older Soviet-era systems, the S-600 used a networked approach with distributed radar and launcher sites. Taking out one node would simply cause the network to adapt. It was designed specifically to counter American air superiority. "There's a weakness," she muttered, more to herself than to Ray. "Every system has a weakness. We just haven't found it yet." The emergency briefing was held in the secure conference room deep within the command center. General Martinez stood at the head of the table, her face grave as she surveyed the assembled officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, as of 0300 hours this morning, we are in a crisis situation with Kazakhstan. Their activation of the S-600 network has effectively cut off our personnel and created a direct threat to regional stability. The President has authorized us to develop immediate response options." The intelligence officer, Colonel Harkins, took over the briefing. "Kazakhstan's leadership believes their new air defense system makes them untouchable. They've issued demands for the withdrawal of all American forces from the region and recognition of their territorial claims over the disputed oil fields." "What about our people on the ground?" someone asked. "We have 27 embassy staff in the capital and a 12-person special forces team near the oil fields. Both groups are in immediate danger if hostilities escalate." "And a conventional extraction?" General Martinez asked. "The S-600 network creates a complete denial bubble extending 250 miles from the capital. Any conventional aircraft, even our stealth platforms, would be detected and engaged before they could reach our people." "What about a high-altitude halo insertion of additional special forces?" asked Colonel Davidson from the Special Operations Command. "The S-600 is specifically designed to detect and track objects at extreme altitudes. A halo team would be vulnerable during descent." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Conventional military options seemed inadequate to the challenge. The lives of American personnel hung in the balance, and the strategic implications of backing down would be felt across the globe. "Colonel Reynolds," General Martinez said, turning to Sophia, "your team has been studying the S-600 capabilities. Do you see any vulnerabilities we can exploit?" All eyes turned to Sophia. The tactical development work she had been leading for the past year had specifically focused on countering next-generation air defense systems. If anyone in the room could find a weakness in the Kazakhstan defenses, it would be her. "The S-600 is formidable, but not impenetrable," Sophia began, activating the tactical display in the center of the conference table. "Its primary strength is its networked architecture, multiple radar sites sharing data to create a comprehensive coverage pattern. However, this networked approach also creates potential vulnerabilities." She manipulated the display to show the known positions of the S-600 components across Kazakhstan. "The system requires precise timing synchronization between its distributed nodes. If we could disrupt this synchronization, even briefly, it would create a temporary blind spot in the coverage pattern." "How temporary?" General Martinez asked. "Potentially just minutes before the system recalibrates. But it might be enough to get a single aircraft through." "And how would we disrupt this synchronization?" This was the difficult part. Sophia took a deep breath before continuing. "A precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse delivered from within the network itself. It would temporarily blind the system without permanently damaging it, reducing the risk of escalation." "From within the network?" Colonel Harkins questioned. "That would require physically infiltrating one of the most heavily guarded military installations in Kazakhstan." "Not necessarily," Sophia countered. "A low-observable aircraft, specifically a modified F-22, could potentially approach close enough to the network's edge to deliver a directed EMP without being detected, if the pilot followed an extremely specific flight path and timing. The risk to the pilot would be extraordinary," General Martinez noted. "Yes, ma'am. It would require flying a course that no conventional mission planner would approve, utilizing terrain features, atmospheric conditions, and precise timing to exploit minute gaps in the radar coverage. The margin for error would be measured in seconds and meters." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of her proposal sank in. "Could you plot such a course, Colonel Reynolds?" General Martinez asked finally. "I already have," Sophia replied, calling up a detailed flight plan on the tactical display. Using our latest intelligence on the S-600 deployment and advanced weather modeling, I've identified a potential approach vector that might, emphasize might, allow a specially modified F-22 to get close enough to deploy an EMP device. The assembled officers studied the flight plan with professional skepticism. It involved flying dangerously low through mountain passes, utilizing weather systems for concealment, and timing maneuvers to exploit the fractional seconds when the S-600's radar systems were transitioning between sweep patterns. "This is theoretical," Colonel Davidson said finally. "In simulation, maybe. But in the real world?" It would take a pilot with extraordinary skills and an intimate knowledge of both the F-22's capabilities and the S-600's operational patterns. "I could fly it," Sophia said quietly. The room fell silent again, all eyes turning to her in surprise. "You're a tactical coordinator, not a combat pilot," Colonel Harkins objected. "I've logged over 3,000 hours in F-22 simulators," Sophia countered. "I know the aircraft's capabilities better than anyone in this room. And I've spent the last year studying every detail of the S-600 system. If anyone can thread this needle, it's me." "Absolutely not," General Martinez said firmly. "You're too valuable as a tactical coordinator. We need you here, guiding the mission, not flying it yourself." "With respect, General, there isn't time to train another pilot on this approach. It took me weeks to develop. And we have hours, not days. Our people on the ground don't have the luxury of waiting while we find another solution." The debate that followed was intense but focused. The lives at stake demanded nothing less than thorough consideration of every aspect of Sophia's proposal. The risks were enormous, but the alternatives seemed equally problematic. After 40 minutes of discussion, General Martinez called for a brief recess to consult directly with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The officers dispersed to their departments to prepare for whatever decision emerged. Sophia returned to her office, her mind racing through the details of the flight plan she had proposed. It was theoretically possible. She had run the simulation hundreds of times, but the real-world variables would be infinitely more complex. If approved, she would be attempting something unprecedented in the history of aerial warfare. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Michael Torres entered, his expression serious. "I heard about your proposal," he said without preamble. "You're crazy if you think they're going to let you fly this mission." "They might not have a choice," Sophia replied. "Time is running out for our people on the ground." Torres shook his head. "Look, I've flown the F-22 in combat for years. What you're proposing, flying through mountain passes at near supersonic speeds, manually timing your movements to exploit radar gaps. It's beyond what even our most experienced pilots would attempt." "I know the risks." "Do you?" "This isn't a simulation, Sophia. If you miscalculate by even a fraction of a second, you'll be detected. And if you're detected, you'll be targeted by the most advanced air defense system on the planet. The S-600 doesn't miss." "I'm not asking for your permission, Michael." Torres studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "No, you're not. But if they approve this insanity, you're going to need all the help you can get. I want to be in the Tactical Operations Center, coordinating your approach. I know how the F-22 handles in real-world conditions, not just in simulations." Before Sophia could respond, Lieutenant Wilson appeared at the door. "Colonel Reynolds, General Martinez is reconvening the briefing in 5 minutes. She wants you to bring your detailed flight plan." The return to the conference room had a different energy, more focused, more urgent. General Martinez stood at the head of the table, her expression revealing nothing about the decision that had been made. "After consultation with the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense, I have been authorized to proceed with a limited operation to extract our personnel from Kyrgyzstan. Colonel Reynolds, your approach has been approved, with modifications." Sophia felt a surge of adrenaline. "What modifications, ma'am? You will not be flying the mission." Before Sophia could protest, General Martinez continued. "However, you will be the mission coordinator, working directly with the pilot who will fly your route. Given the unprecedented nature of this approach, we need your expertise guiding the mission from the Tactical Operations Center. Who will be flying it? Sophia asked, already suspecting the answer. Captain Torres has volunteered. As our most experienced F-22 combat pilot, he has the best chance of executing your flight plan successfully. Sophia glanced at Torres, who nodded slightly. He must have volunteered immediately after leaving her office. The mission will proceed in 12 hours, General Martinez continued. That gives us time to modify an F-22 with the EMP delivery system and for Colonel Reynolds to brief Captain Torres on every detail of the approach. I don't need to emphasize the stakes involved. If this fails, we will have no choice but to attempt a high-risk conventional extraction, which could lead to broader conflict. As the briefing concluded and the officers dispersed to their assignments, Sophia approached Torres. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "You saved my squadron over Kazzar Valley. I trust your tactical judgment more than anyone's. If you say this route is flyable, I believe you." The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Sophia worked with the technical team to modify an F-22 with a specially designed electromagnetic pulse device that would temporarily disrupt the S-600's synchronization without causing permanent damage. Meanwhile, she spent hours with Torres, walking him through every detail of the flight plan. "The critical moment comes here," she explained, pointing to a section of the tactical display showing a narrow mountain pass. "You'll need to time your approach to coincide exactly with the radar sweep transition. You'll have a window of approximately 3.5 seconds when the network is momentarily blind. And if I miss that window, then you'll be detected and the mission is compromised." Torres studied the approach vectors with professional intensity. "The G-forces through this turn will be at the aircraft's structural limits." "I know, but it's necessary to stay below the radar horizon during that segment." As the hours ticked by, Sophia became increasingly concerned about a detail in the weather forecast. A developing storm system threatened to create unpredictable wind shear near one of the critical mountain passes. The simulation hadn't accounted for this variable. She brought her concerns to General Martinez 3 hours before the mission launch. "The storm introduces a significant unknown variable," she explained. "The wind patterns could make it impossible to maintain the precise flight path required for the approach." "Can you calculate alternative routes?" the general asked. "Not in the time we have left. The approach was designed around specific terrain features and radar patterns. Changing it now would require starting from scratch." General Martinez considered this information gravely. "What do you recommend, Colonel?" Sophia hesitated only briefly. "I need to fly the mission myself. We've been through this. General, with respect, the situation has changed. This approach now requires real-time adaptation that can only come from the person who designed it. Captain Torres is an exceptional pilot, but he hasn't spent months studying the S-600's operational patterns like I have. I can make the necessary adjustments during flight. He would be flying blind. You haven't flown an actual F-22 in combat conditions." "No, but I've spent more time in F-22 simulators than any pilot in the Air Force. I know the aircraft's capabilities and limitations intimately. More importantly, I understand exactly how the S-600 system operates and how to exploit its weaknesses." General Martinez was silent for a long moment, weighing the factors in this impossible decision. Finally, she nodded once. "Make your case to Captain Torres. If he agrees that you're better suited to fly this mission, I'll authorize the change." Torres listened carefully as Sophia explained the new complications introduced by the weather system. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes revealed his understanding of the technical challenges. "You designed this approach," he said when she had finished. "You understand its nuances better than I ever could, even with your excellent briefing. If you believe you can fly it more effectively, especially with these new complications, then I support your taking the mission." "You're giving up a combat mission," Sophia noted. "That's not something pilots usually do willingly." Torres smiled slightly. "This isn't about pilot ego. It's about getting our people home safely. If you're the best person for that job, then you should fly it." With Torres's support, General Martinez reluctantly approved the change. Sophia was immediately escorted to the flight preparation area, where the modified F-22 waited. The aircraft technician gave her a final briefing on the EMP device. It's been integrated with the weapon system. One press of the trigger will activate it. You'll need to be within 20 kilometers of the primary S-600 command node for maximum effectiveness. Understood. As Sophia completed her pre-flight checks, General Martinez approached the aircraft for a final word. Colonel Reynolds, I want to be clear. This mission has been authorized as a non-aggressive defensive measure to protect American personnel. The EMP device has been specifically calibrated to cause temporary disruption only. This is not an authorization for broader engagement. Yes, ma'am. Get in, deliver the EMP, create the window for the extraction team, get out. No additional engagement. The general nodded. Good luck, Colonel. Bring yourself and our people home safely. As the canopy lowered, Sophia felt a surreal calm descend over her. After years of simulations and tactical coordination, she was finally sitting in the actual cockpit of an F-22, preparing for a real combat mission. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent her career fighting for the opportunity to fly, and now that opportunity had come in the most dangerous circumstances imaginable. The powerful engines roared to life, and Sophia taxied toward the runway. In the Tactical Operations Center, Torres would be monitoring her progress, ready to provide guidance if needed. But once she crossed into Kazakhstan airspace, she would be on her own, flying a path that existed only in theory until now. Raptor 1, you are cleared for takeoff, came the controller's voice. Mission is go. Godspeed, Colonel. Sophia pushed the throttle forward, feeling the massive thrust press her back into her seat as the F-22 accelerated down the runway. Within seconds, she was airborne, climbing rapidly into the night sky. The most dangerous mission of her life had begun, not because she had been ordered to fly it, but because she had fought for the right to try the impossible when nothing else would save American lives. The F-22 Raptor sliced through the night sky, its advanced stealth features rendering it nearly invisible to conventional radar. Sophia flew southeast, maintaining a cruising altitude that would keep her clear of civilian air traffic while conserving fuel for the critical phases of the mission ahead. Raptor 1, this is home base. Torres's voice came through her headset. Weather update shows the storm system intensifying over the Kazzar Mountains. Wind speeds at the first approach point are now gusting to 70 knots. Copy that, Sophia replied, making mental adjustments to her flight plan. The increased wind speed would affect her timing through the mountain pass, requiring a steeper approach angle to maintain the necessary speed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 2 hours into the flight, Sophia approached the border of Kazakhstan airspace. From this point forward, she would be flying in hostile territory, relying solely on the carefully plotted course she had designed to exploit the fractional weaknesses in the S-600 air defense system. Raptor 1, you are approaching the operational zone. General Martinez's voice came through clearly. Final authorization for mission execution is confirmed. You are cleared to proceed. Copy that, home base. Going to radio silence in 30 seconds. Sophia checked her systems one final time. The EMP device showed ready, its targeting systems integrated with the F-22's advanced avionics. The aircraft itself was performing flawlessly, its responsive controls feeling like an extension of her own body after thousands of simulator hours. Raptor 1, this is Torres. Remember, the real aircraft has subtleties the simulator doesn't capture. Trust your instincts if something feels off. Copy that. Radio silence commencing now. Raptor 1 out. With that final transmission, Sophia was truly alone. The mission clock on her display began counting down, synchronizing with the predicted radar sweep patterns of the S-600 system. Timing would be everything. She reduced altitude rapidly, dropping to just 500 feet above the rugged mountain terrain. At this height, the natural features of the landscape would help mask her approach from the distant radar stations. The F-22's engines roared as she pushed the aircraft to near supersonic speed, threading between jagged peaks with mere seconds to spare on her carefully calculated timetable. The first critical waypoint approached, a narrow pass between two mountains where the S-600's radar coverage had a microscopic blind spot due to signal reflection patterns. According to her calculations, she would have a 3-2-second window to slip through undetected. Sophia felt time slow as she approached the pass. The violent crosswinds Torres had warned about buffeted the aircraft, threatening to push her off course. In the simulator, these conditions would have been manageable. In reality, they required every ounce of her concentration and skill. She made a split-second adjustment, banking the F-22 at a steeper angle than planned to compensate for the crosswind while maintaining her exact speed and altitude. The mountain walls seemed to close in around her, the darkness broken only by the dim glow of her instrument panel. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1. The F-22 shot through the narrow gap, the radar-absorbing mountain walls shielding her from detection during the critical moment when the S-600's synchronized sweep would have otherwise revealed her presence. First obstacle cleared. 3 more to go. The storm intensified as she descended into the valley beyond. Rain lashing against the canopy and turbulence tossing the aircraft like a toy. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the towering cumulonimbus clouds that had not been predicted to develop so quickly. This was the kind of real-world variable that no simulation could fully account for. The unpredictable fury of nature combined with the deadly precision of man-made weapon systems. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, Sophia felt a strange calm descend over her. This was what she had trained for all those years, developing an intuitive understanding of flight dynamics that went beyond textbook knowledge. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The next waypoint required flying through a canyon that would shield her from the eastern radar stations, while she executed a precise sequence of altitude changes to avoid detection from the western stations. The storm complicated matters, creating unpredictable updrafts that could suddenly push her above the radar horizon. Sophia adjusted her approach, flying slightly lower than planned to give herself margin for error against the updrafts. The canyon walls rushed by at terrifying speed, visible only through the F-22's advanced night vision systems. A sudden warning light flashed on her control panel, a momentary radar lock from one of the peripheral S-600 stations. Not a full detection, but a concerning indication that she was dancing on the edge of visibility. Sophia didn't panic. Instead, she executed a rolling dive deeper into the canyon, using a technique she had developed but never tested in real flight, a maneuver that exploited the F-22's thrust vectoring to change direction without altering its radar cross-section profile. The warning light went out. The brief radar contact had been lost. 2 obstacles cleared. 2 more to go. The storm reached its peak intensity as she approached the third waypoint, a series of rapid altitude changes timed to coincide precisely with the S-600's radar sweep pattern. This was the most technically demanding segment of the entire flight plan, requiring split-second timing and perfect aircraft control. Lightning struck dangerously close, the electromagnetic discharge temporarily affecting her navigation systems. For 3 heart-stopping seconds, her primary guidance display flickered and went dark, leaving her flying on instinct and backup instruments. In that moment, all her years of simulator training proved their worth. Without hesitation, Sophia continued the maneuver sequence from memory, counting the seconds in her head while making micro-adjustments based on the feel of the aircraft and the backup altitude indicator. The primary systems came back online just as she completed the sequence, confirming what her instincts had told her. She had maintained the perfect flight path despite the temporary system's failure. 3 obstacles cleared. 1 final approach to go. The last segment was the most dangerous. A direct approach to the primary S-600 command node, coming close enough to deliver the EMP while remaining undetected. This would require flying within the system's theoretical detection range, relying on precise timing to exploit a predicted gap in the radar coverage. According to her analysis, the networked nature of the S-600 created a synchronization delay of approximately 0.8 seconds when transitioning between certain coverage sectors. This brief window was her only chance to approach the target undetected. The target area came into view, a heavily fortified military installation nestled in a valley, surrounded by multiple radar arrays and missile batteries. From her current position, Sophia could see the massive radar dishes rotating in their precisely coordinated patterns, searching the skies for exactly the kind of threat she represented. She began the final approach, pushing the F-22 to its performance limits. The aircraft responded beautifully, its advanced flight systems translating her inputs into perfectly executed maneuvers, despite the continuing storm. The mission clock counted down to the predicted radar gap. 20 seconds. 15, 10. Sophia positioned the aircraft for the approach run, aligning her flight path with the calculated blind spot in the radar coverage. Everything depended on her timing now. Too early or too late, and she would be detected instantly. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. She pushed the throttle forward, sending the F-22 streaking toward the target at maximum speed. The G-forces pressed her back into her seat as the aircraft accelerated to its limit, covering the final distance in seconds. The targeting system locked onto the command node, a nondescript building that housed the central processing computers for the entire S-600 network. At exactly the calculated moment, Sophia pressed the weapon release trigger. The EMP device deployed, its specialized directional emitter, focusing an intense electromagnetic pulse directly at the target. There was no explosion, no visible effect at all, just a brief surge of energy that would temporarily overload the delicate electronics within the command center. Sophia immediately executed a high-G turn away from the target, pushing the F-22 into a climbing roll that would carry her away from the danger zone before the S-600 operators could realize what had happened. For several seconds, nothing changed. The radar dishes continued their steady rotation, the missile batteries remained in standby mode. Had the EMP failed to penetrate the hardened facility? Then, one by one, the radar dishes faltered in their rotation. The synchronized pattern broke down as each node lost communication with the central command system. The perfect defensive bubble that had made Kazakhstan airspace impenetrable began to dissolve into an uncoordinated collection of individual radar stations. "It worked," Sophia whispered to herself, watching the chaos unfold below her. The window for the extraction team had been opened. She banked the F-22 toward her exit route, maintaining her stealth profile as she accelerated away from the target area. The mission wasn't over yet. She still had to escape Kazakhstan airspace before the S-600 system recovered or switched to manual operation. As she climbed above the storm clouds, Sophia allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The theoretical weakness she had identified in the S-600 system had proven real. Her unconventional approach, both in terms of her flight path and her analytical methodology, had succeeded where traditional military thinking had seen no solution. The border was still 30 minutes away when her radar warning receiver suddenly blared to life. Multiple enemy fighters had been scrambled, their older generation radar systems still operational despite the disruption to the S-600 network. This wasn't part of the mission plan. The extraction window for the ground team would be closing soon, and engaging with enemy fighters would risk escalating the conflict beyond the limited operation that had been authorized. Sophia had a choice to make: either evade the fighters and potentially lead them toward the extraction team, or engage them to draw attention away from the rescue operation. The decision took less than a second. She banked the F-22 sharply, turning directly toward the approaching fighters. Her mission parameters had specified non-engagement, but sometimes the situation on the ground required adaptation. The most important objective was ensuring the safe extraction of American personnel. "Sorry, General," she murmured as she activated the F-22's combat systems. "Sometimes you have to improvise." The enemy fighters, older MiG-29s, were no match for the F-22's advanced capabilities. Sophia didn't need to destroy them. She just needed to confuse and distract them long enough for the extraction team to complete their mission. She executed a series of complex maneuvers that showcased the F-22's superior agility, appearing on the enemy radar just long enough to draw their attention before disappearing again. The MiGs followed predictably, chasing sensor ghosts and momentary contacts while being drawn progressively away from the extraction zone. For 15 tense minutes, Sophia played this deadly game of cat and mouse, never firing a shot, but keeping the enemy fighters completely occupied and confused. With each passing minute, the extraction team would be getting closer to rescuing the embassy personnel and special forces team. Finally, her fuel reserves reaching critical levels, Sophia made a last high-speed run toward the border. The MiGs attempted to pursue, but their inferior engines couldn't maintain the pace. One by one, they broke off the chase, returning to their base as the F-22 disappeared into international airspace. Raptor 1 to home base, breaking radio silence. Sophia transmitted once she was safely beyond Kazakhstan territory. Mission accomplished. EMP delivered successfully. Requesting status update on extraction team. The response came immediately. General Martinez herself. Raptor 1, this is home base. Extraction complete. All personnel recovered safely. The S-600 disruption provided exactly the window we needed. Well done, Colonel. The flight back to base was long, but uneventful. As the adrenaline faded, Sophia felt the full weight of what she had accomplished. She had flown a mission that conventional wisdom had deemed impossible, exploiting theoretical weaknesses that existed only in her analytical models until she had proven them real. More importantly, she had saved lives, not just the embassy staff and special forces team, but potentially countless others who might have been lost in a larger conflict if a conventional military response had been necessary. The runway lights of Washington Air Force Base appeared on the horizon just as dawn was breaking. After nearly 9 hours in the cockpit, Sophia brought the F-22 in for a perfect landing, the aircraft touching down with barely a bump despite her fatigue. As she taxied toward the hangar, she saw a crowd waiting: General Martinez, Captain Torres, Ray Morgan, and dozens of other personnel from the Tactical Operations Center. This wasn't the standard reception for a returning mission. Sophia completed the shutdown sequence and opened the canopy. The morning air felt shockingly cool after hours in the climate-controlled cockpit. She removed her helmet and climbed down the ladder, her legs stiff from the long flight. General Martinez approached first, her expression a mixture of relief and something Sophia hadn't seen before. Respect without reservation. "Colonel Reynolds," the general said formally, "on behalf of the President and a grateful nation, I commend you for extraordinary service above and beyond the call of duty." Before Sophia could respond, Captain Torres stepped forward. "You did it," he said simply. "You flew a course that none of us thought was possible." "Not just flew it," Ray added. "You adapted it in real time to changing conditions that would have grounded most pilots. The data we're getting from your flight recorder is going to revolutionize our tactical approach to advanced air defense systems." The technical debrief that followed was exhaustive. For hours, Sophia walked the assembled officers through every phase of the mission, explaining her decision-making process and the real-world adjustments she had made to her theoretical flight plan. "The key insight," she explained, pointing to the tactical display showing the S-600 network, "was understanding that even the most sophisticated defensive system has inherent limitations based on physics and information processing speeds. The synchronization delay between nodes was theoretical in our models, but proved to be exploitable in practice." "And the engagement with the MiG fighters?" General Martinez asked. "That wasn't part of the mission parameters." "No, ma'am. It was a field decision based on the need to protect the extraction team. I determined that drawing the fighters away from the operation was the best way to ensure mission success, even if it meant technically exceeding my authorization." Instead of the reprimand Sophia half expected, General Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "Your judgment was sound. The extraction team reported that enemy air activity shifted away from their position at a critical moment, giving them the clear corridor they needed." 3 days later, Sophia was summoned to the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs of Staff wanted a personal briefing on her mission and its implications for future operations against advanced air defense systems. As she prepared for the briefing, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the simulator pilot who had been denied combat roles to the tactical analyst who had designed an impossible mission to the combat pilot who had executed it successfully, each step had required not just skill, but the courage to challenge conventional thinking. The Kazakhstan mission had changed everything. The Air Force was already implementing new training protocols based on her approach, teaching pilots to identify and exploit the subtle weaknesses in seemingly impenetrable defense systems. The rigid distinction between combat pilots and tactical analysts was being reconsidered, with integrated teams now being formed to combine diverse perspectives. Most importantly, Sophia herself had changed. The frustration that had once driven her, the need to prove herself in a system that seemed determined to limit her role, had been replaced by a deeper understanding of leadership. True leadership wasn't about titles or permissions. It was about having the courage to act when action was needed, the skills to succeed under pressure, and the wisdom to know which rules could be bent and which must be respected. As she stood before the assembled Joint Chiefs the next day, explaining how a simulator pilot had found a way through the world's most advanced air defense system, Sophia knew that her story would inspire others facing similar barriers. Sometimes the most effective weapon against seemingly impossible odds isn't found in the latest technology or firepower, but in the unconventional thinking of someone who refuses to accept that something cannot be done. The Secretary of Defense summed it up best at the conclusion of her briefing. "Colonel Reynolds, you've demonstrated that sometimes our greatest advantage isn't our hardware but our people. Specifically, people who have the courage to think differently and the determination to act on their convictions. That's a lesson we would do well to remember." 6 months later, Sophia stood in the newly created Advanced Tactical Development Center, surrounded by a team of pilots, engineers, and analysts who had been handpicked for their innovative thinking and diverse perspectives. As the center's commanding officer, she was responsible for identifying and exploiting weaknesses in the next generation of threat systems. The Kurdistan mission had become a case study taught at the Air Force Academy, not just for its tactical brilliance, but for the lessons it offered about initiative, adaptation, and the courage to challenge established thinking. Sophia herself occasionally lectured on the experience, emphasizing that the most important quality in modern warfare wasn't technical skill alone, but the ability to recognize when conventional approaches had reached their limits. Captain Torres, now Lieutenant Colonel Torres, ran the flight testing division of the center, translating theoretical approaches into practical flight techniques. He and Sophia had developed a close professional partnership based on mutual respect and complementary skills. "You know what I find most ironic about all this?" Torres said one day as they reviewed data from a recent test flight. "If they had let you fly combat missions from the beginning, you might never have developed the analytical skills that made the Kurdistan mission possible." Sophia considered this. Maybe. Or maybe I would have found a different way to make a difference. The point isn't that restrictions can sometimes lead to unexpected strengths. It's that we shouldn't need artificial barriers to bring out the best in our people. The center's work was already paying dividends. New tactical approaches developed under Sophia's leadership had increased mission success rates across multiple theaters, and pilot casualty rates had decreased significantly. More importantly, potential adversaries were beginning to recognize that their advanced defense systems weren't the deterrents they had once believed, leading to renewed diplomatic engagement rather than military confrontation. Standing at the window of her office, watching the next generation of experimental aircraft being prepared for test flights, Sophia reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. The simulator pilot who had been told to stay in her lane had ended up redefining the entire approach to aerial warfare. Sometimes the greatest contributions come from those who refuse to be limited by arbitrary rules or traditional thinking. Sometimes the most profound leadership emerges not from those with the highest rank, but from those with the clearest vision and the courage to act on it. Sophia's story had become more than personal vindication. It had become a symbol of the transformation needed across the military and beyond. In a world of increasingly complex challenges, success would belong not to those who followed the established playbook, but to those who dared to write a new one. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.